Let's start with the breaking news, and then we'll get to the smear and intimidate tactics on the right. Jackie, a big breakthrough for the committee. The effort to get Pat Cipollone to cooperate in a fulsome manner has been a public and private one. Explain the significance of his testimony on Friday.
Yeah, Nicole, this is certainly a very good development for the committee. Lawmakers had privately been saying that getting Pat Cipollone to sit before them and agree to a videotape transcribed interview would be a very big get. And now they're going to get just that. I believe they're going to try to use Pat's behind the scenes testimony to corroborate some of the more major parts of Cassidy Hutchinson's testimony. For example, Cassidy Hutchinson's claim that Pat Cipollone told her that she needed to prevent at all costs the former president from going to the Capitol with pro-Trump rioters who ultimately sieged that Capitol because, quote, we're going to get charges of every crime imaginable, is what Hutchinson testified that Pat Cipollone told her that morning prior to the rally. So I think the committee, these investigators are quite meticulous. I'm sure they've had a long laundry list of questions that they want to tick through to get him on tape saying, but we do know that there are certain parameters that Pat Cipollone ultimately agreed to. He has, through his lawyers, communicated that he is not going to testify or speak about any direct conversations that he had with the former president in the vein of exerting executive privilege. That being said, there are multiple people so far who have been extremely helpful to the committee, including people like Eric Hirschman, people we've already seen in these videotape depositions who have been helpful despite not providing direct criticisms of the former president or divulging private details of their conversations with him. So either way, Pat Cipollone is likely going to be extremely helpful for this committee as they get into their final weeks of the public hearings.
You know, Jonathan Lemire, just listening to Jackie's recounting, and I actually have some of the testimony she's talking about. I'm going to play that in a second. Pat Cipollone doesn't have to talk about any of his conversations with Donald Trump. Pat Cipollone is most important, frankly, in his conversations with Cassidy Hutchinson and Mark Meadows and others about what the perils were on that day. It has been widely reported that he was so concerned about criminality that he thought Donald Trump could be charged that day. And with the smears, I tried to peek a little bit at what happened to Cassidy Hutchinson in the wake of her testimony. Really not much substantive pushback. But this one anecdote about a secondhand story she recounted was blown up by the right. It seems that Pat Cipollone comes in and is able to corroborate her testimony about what happened in the halls in and around the chief of staff's office. It's a lights out moment for Donald J. Trump.
Yeah, let's start with that one moment of secondhand testimony, because we've seen this time and again from the former president and his allies, where they grab a hold of one detail, one thing that may not be 100% right or open for interpretation, and they try to use that to discredit everything else. And let's be clear, Cassidy Hutchinson's testimony, even if you set aside the moment in the presidential SUV where she says that Donald Trump reached for a Secret Service agent or reached for the steering wheel, take that out entirely, her testimony is still incredibly damning. And it certainly seems that Pat Cipollone, the White House counsel, who was everywhere that day in the West Wing, will be able to corroborate that. And we should also note, as an aside, some videos emerged of that moment near the ellipse in the SUV. And it sure does look like Donald Trump is at the very least gesturing wildly into the front seat. So perhaps that story is right after all. Setting that aside, Cipollone, of course, you know, he is, as you just mentioned, was telling everyone within earshot that day that he was afraid there were all sorts of crimes being committed. He worried that top aides, as well as the then president, could be held criminally liable for what was happening on the other side of Pennsylvania Avenue at the Capitol. So he comes in, and even if moments are deemed executive privilege, his conversations that he had with aides surrounding Trump will be hugely valuable. And the testimony, I believe, is being videotaped. So certainly we could see portions of that in future hearings. So this is a significant score for the committee. And one wonders, with Cipollone's cooperation, does it open the door for some other senior aides who, to this point, have resisted playing ball? Maybe they'll change their minds, too.
Yeah, and I mean, the I suppose quasi-sacred principle he's seeking to protect in executive privilege has no bearing among other staffers, and certainly not among conversations held with other people advising an ex-president. I want to show how Pat Cipollone has already figured prominently into the hearings. Let me play this for you, Eddie Glad.
I saw Mr. Cipollone right before I walked out onto West Exec that morning, and Mr. Cipollone said something to the effect of, please make sure we don't go up to the Capitol, Cassidy. Keep in touch with me. We're going to get charged with every crime imaginable if we make that movement happen.
And do you remember which crimes Mr. Cipollone was concerned with?
In the days leading up to the 6th, we had conversations about potentially obstructing justice or defrauding the electoral count. Mr. Hirschman and White House counsel's office were urging the speechwriters to not include that language for legal concerns and also for the optics of what it could portray the president wanting to do that day. I remember Pat saying something to the effect of, Mark, we need to do something more. They're literally calling for the vice president to be effing hung. And Mark had responded something to the effect of, you heard him, Pat. He thinks Mike deserves it. He doesn't think they're doing anything wrong.
Eddie, two things strike me watching that again. You know, one, there's no privilege in a conversation between Mark Meadows and Pat Cipollone. None. There's none. And two, you know, he wouldn't be the first White House counsel to be worried about being a witness to, or perhaps even an accessory to, obstruction of justice. Don McGahn spends, 19 to 30 hours testifying before Robert Mueller and is the narrator in chief of the second volume of the Mueller report. I mean, Trump doesn't have new moves, and obstructing justice is a go-to for him. It seems that once he testifies in a fulsome manner, which there's no indication that's not the case, this committee will have a lot of what it's looking for.
Absolutely. And I think the corroboration of Cassidy, of her testimony by Cipollone will just be, I think, what kind of shot would we call it? I mean, it would be an important moment in the hearings. And it seems to me that corroboration will begin to connect the dots for us to really hold Trump responsible. So this is really important on a number of different levels, Nicole. And again, attorney-client privilege doesn't enter here because he's just going to be corroborating something we've already heard.